morning, everyone. It's nice to be here amongst all of the automotive enthusiasts this morning. I'm going to talk about hardware and software technology trends. I would like to make some preliminary comments. So Mr. Vinod Agrawal, in his first address, talked about the importance of mobility industry in our country in terms of its GDP contribution, in terms of its employment contribution. I would probably go a step further. I would equate the progress of mobility to the progress of humanity. Our ancestors got down from the trees and started walking on their 2 feet. I think that's the start of mobility. We started walking out of Africa and we walked all across the globe. That's a part of mobility. We went to the depth of the seas and the height of the skies. That's a part of mobility. And now we have been to Moon. Now we want to go to Mars and other planets. That's a part of mobility. So the way I look at it is mobility can be completely equated with the progress of humanity. And I think we have a role to play in that area. This field of mobility is changing now in such a way that it has not changed in the last 100 years since Henry Ford came up with the Model T. You would recollect that was really a paradigm shift in the industry. And we are today at a similar paradigm shift. And I want to talk to you about that paradigm shift, what is causing that shift, and what are the implications of that shift. And I have a presentation because there is a lot of matter I want to talk about. I must make a first disclaimer saying that this presentation is focused on the passenger car industry. And it doesn't cover commercial vehicles or, for that matter, 2 or 3 wheelers. And the reason I have done that is that a lot of technology is driven by the passenger car industry where there are a lot of volumes and therefore a lot of ability to invest in new technology. So with that as like a preliminary statement, let me get into my presentation. And let me give you an overview of the presentation. I'm going to talk about what is causing the change in the industry, what changes are actually happening, and what can we look forward in the years to come in this industry. And I think that is something that would address the thoughts or concerns or opportunities that a lot of our young colleagues that are here, whose most of their careers are going to be over the next 30, 40 years in this industry. So with that, let's begin. And one other comment I would like to make is that I'm not going to talk about just the Indian industry, I'm going to talk about global trends because I think they have a direct impact on the industry that we see in India. So, if you were to look at light vehicle sales by volume in the last year, almost 50% of those sales were contributed by the developed economies, which is, the US, Europe, Japan, and maybe you can put Korea into it. 50% of the volumes coming from the developed world. And if you look at what is happening in that developed world, this is a chart which shows the growth from 2013 to 2023 estimated, and from 2023 to 29 projected. One thing that you will notice, that for the last 10 years and for the next 6 years, the largest chunk of the market is showing a certain degree of flatness. That is the reality of the large market. You look at sales in China. China is, of course, showing extraordinary growth. But since we want to look at trends, we need to talk about those countries which are connected kind of with the rest of the world. China is somewhat geopolitically separate from the rest. It's a little disconnected. Although I must say that it's a major driver in 2 of the most important trends in the world, which is electrification and ADAS. And of course, India is growing well, and my predecessor, Mr. Vinod Agrawal, talked about the rate of growth that is happening. So it's growing but from a smaller base. And I would say that about 70% of the India's market is held by international OEMs coming from the developed world. So I want to hark back to the trends I want to look at in the developed world, because I think they are relevant to us, because sooner rather than later, these trends are going to have an impact on what we do here in India. So why the stagnancy in the auto sales in the developed markets? So you see a whole bunch of things. First is, of course, the Gen Z and beyond. You know, there are a lot of concerns about whether, we need to own things rather than use things. And, you see this across the industries, right? I mean, you see the changes in Airbnb, the largest hotelier, so to say, not having any hotels on their own. You see them in largest car driving, like an Uber or Ola, where ownership is not there. And this new generation is really looking at experience rather than ownership. Therefore, they would rather use a car than own a car. And that's something that is get reflected in the number of cars that are being sold. The second one is, of course, a very major concern about sustainability and the climate consciousness. And world over, all the analysis that has been done by many companies shows that many people, especially the younger generation, is willing to pay a premium for a cleaner solution. So the move towards electrification. So if you look at the flatness of the auto sales and juxtapose that with the growth in electric vehicles, you can see a distinct trend. So sustainability, and 16% of the global emissions come from our industry. So obviously there is something that we need to do about it. And so, so that's an impact on vehicle ownership. If you look at most of the developed economies, the reality is that the population growth is flat. Actually, it is going down. And that also has an impact, on the ownership. I was reading the figures about Germany this morning, which came up in The Economist. The German population has gone up from 3.4 million to 3.8 million, contributed by 1 million of immigration coming from Ukraine. So the actual, growth rate is negative. If you look at even in India, in almost all the states excepting 6, our growth rate is tending towards negative. So globally, now from a climate perspective, whether that is good or bad is a different matter, but the reality of the world is that especially in developed markets, this is it. There is increased urbanization, reduction of space. I don't have to tell the audience in Bangalore about what is the consequence of having a lot of personal cars. So I think that's having an impact on us. And there are also promising new technologies of spatial computing and multiverse. And all of us have seen the latest, big hullabaloo about the Vision Pro. You don't have to, I remember in long ago, when the first intercom came, a very high impact advertisement being rolled out by a company which says, you don't have to walk if you want to talk. You can use the intercom. So now, if you want to talk or if you want to have a personal conversation, even multiverse or, this is available. So if this is the thing in the world, how is it that the auto companies are responding to it? I think that is a key question in deciding what is going to happen as far as this industry is concerned. So, globally, the auto industry is looking at a different relationship with its customers. And that relationship is based on some of these factors. They want to create a long-term, lifelong relationship with the customer. There was a time when a car was sold to a customer, and that was the end of relationship between the OEM and the customer. That is going to change because all the auto companies realize that there is a lot of money to be made throughout the lifetime rather than one time. So that's one thing that they want to do. They want to provide immersive digital user experience while a person is inside a car. So you must have read, of course, that auto OEMs are now saying, treat your car as your second home. Or treat your car as a visit to a doctor because you sit inside the car. The car can take your blood pressure measurement. It can do all kinds of measurements because of the new technologies coming in healthcare. It can watch your face, watch your emotions. It can tell where you are. The most surprising experience that I have is when I'm driving in the morning from my home to my office and I turn to my YouTube, And it gives its own recommendations, and I hear devotional songs. And when I do the same in the evening, when I'm back from the office, I hear all these Hindi duets. The intelligence is there to know where I am, at what time, what I'm doing. And a car can have that even more than my phone, because I don't sit inside my phone, I sit inside my car. So what is it? The OEMs are now looking at immersive experience. They also want to create multiple sources of monetization. How can they continue to make money from the new experience that the customer is going to get? They want to increase their business efficiency. They want to increase the scope with new partners like cloud and semicon companies. So those of you who are watching the investments that OEMs are making in new companies or the investments that they are making in collaborations, you would see the names of a lot of semicon companies. You would see the name of a lot of cloud companies. You would see the name of a lot of hyperscalers, because that's the new kind of relationships that the auto industry is making. Vehicle personalization, So a car is a car to me, is a my car to me if I do some personalization of my vehicle. So strong actions on vehicle personalization. Maximization of cross-domain applicability of portability. So, whether you are at home, you're in the car, you're in your office, how do you ensure that the experiences remain the same? And what's the role that an auto company can make in that? And very importantly, provide an ease for maintenance, especially when you want to give lifelong experience to someone as the electronics and software keep on improving. So this is something that the auto OEMs are trying to do. And these strategies result in major shift in approach towards both hardware as well as software. So if you look at hardware, first is, of course, hardware consolidation. I remember my early days in this area where we would talk about a Lexus having 130 ECUs in that. Now, the auto OEMs are realizing that the cost of electronic hardware in a car is just too much and something needs to be done about it. And of course, the recent shock that they got out of this pandemic when they had to wait for their chips to come has also told them that it's important to consolidate the hardware. So now we are moving from distributed hardware to domain controllers to centralized computers, and a lot of consolidation is happening, not only from the perspective of reducing the expense, but also to get better control on it. So strong things happening in that. A lot of work happening in hardware and software decoupling. Because, the OEMs have realized, and if you remember, I remember meeting the chairperson of GM sometime in 2008-9. Coming out of the update, they realized that the tier ones had much higher income than the OEMs, because the ownership of the tier ones on the hardware and software was so very strong. And now every OEM is looking at decoupling the two, so that, he's able to balance his own incomes vis-a-vis the other industry partners' incomes. Robust end-to-end safety and cybersecurity. The more we have an OTA, over-the-air updates, the more is the need for security. So a lot of things happening in that area. And now there is a lot of talk of quantum computing, how that's going to aid in this. So big actions happening in that area. Next generation sensors. I have a view about how a car of the future will be, but I think sensors are going to play an extremely important role. And of course, the high voltage power. These are some of the trends that you see in the hardware area. What do you see in the software area? If the OEM wants to have an ongoing relationship with his customers, he needs to make continuous upgrades, and therefore faster feature upgrades and updates. That's going to happen through software. Multi-OS, multi-domain software reuse. How can you ensure that the cost of software is also kept in control? How do you have seamless software integration? That you see happening. Speedy development. And that speedy development is not just about the software, but it starts from the hardware design all the way up to the SOP. We have been working now a lot with semicon companies because they come into play now. You can't have a situation where a semicon company takes some requirements from an OEM, it delivers a semicon 4 years later, then the working is done on that for another 3 years and the vehicle goes into production. No, there is so much of work being done on virtualization. No. I want to drink water, not to have a bath. It's okay. Thank you. Speedy development. So virtualization making a big difference. And data-driven scalable features and services. So these are some of the things which are happening on the software side. All of that is really getting into a focus on software-defined vehicles. You know, I come from the IT industry, which is globally famous, or maybe not so very famous about hype with new technologies, okay, and new names. And so when the word software-defined vehicles came, I thought software industry has entered auto industry. But when I see the depth of what is happening, I see there is a lot of merit in what we are now going ahead with as software-defined vehicles. And I'll talk a bit about software-defined vehicles because that term encapsulates what is happening on both hardware and software side inside an OEM. What is a major change that is happening? To me, the major change is happening is about the role of a computer inside a vehicle. There was a time where you had this 100-odd ECUs inside a car. So you had a car which had computers inside. Today, the things are changing to where there is a computer and there is a car around it. And I think that's a major change. So if you look at somebody like a Tesla, the work starts with chip design. The work starts at the OS level. It defines a computer. It defines what the functions of that computers are. And then there is a car built around it. And that is a significant change in the focus. And that is a significant change why now hardware and software are becoming an important part in a vehicle. All driven by the earlier factors that I mentioned about. This is a very interesting chart. So this talks about the automotive software spend as a percentage of the operating profit of some 6 larger auto OEMs across the world. 47% of R&D expenditure as a percentage of operating profits. 104%, 220%, 117%, 60%. That shows the importance that the auto OEMs are now giving to the role of software inside a vehicle. You know, that brings out a clear change in the focus, driven actually by the change in the business model, driven by the change in the buyer preferences, all of that. So a new ecosystem is emerging, you know, where that auto OEM is like the sun in the solar system, the major OEM, and you can see it working with not only tier 1s and tier 2s, but also with software companies, and you have a lot of software tier 1s now coming in, cloud companies, hyperscalers, because you are all talking about connectivity now and the important role in that. And I'm sure you have all heard about the investment that are happening by Google and Apple in all these areas. And semiconductor companies. And all of you have heard that NVIDIA became a $1 trillion market cap company last year. And that is in no small measure because of the role that their chips will play in the future of automotives. So, these are the new kind of companions that are coming into this industry. The way we look at it is a new automotive is a software, it's electronic hardware, it's energy and storage, and it's other hardware. And this is not to downplay the other hardware, but I am saying the changing shift of the OEMs in this area. And I think each of these quadrants there is something important to it. If you look at software is really it's a reflection of the knowledge, the intelligence, the insight that will bring in, and a lot more now impact on artificial intelligence coming in. Hardware, I talked about connectivity, consolidation. Car has a second home. It's a very important proposition that the auto OEMs are coming up with. And next gen sensors. So we see that happening. Energy, I didn't speak much about energy so far, but now there is this whole talk and there is a lot of work about two-way chargers, etc. Whether a car is only a car or it's your energy storage device. Why do you need a Tesla wall if you have a Tesla car? Because a Tesla car can have a lot more energy stored into it than a wall. And as it is, you need a car in any case. So And I like to link a physical world to a biological world. In a biological world, you breathe in, you breathe out. There is a movement. I think the overall global energy ecosystem also needs to breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in when it generates energy, breathe out when it consumes energy. And I see in times to come an automotive industry becoming a part of this global breathe in and breathe out. It will take the energy in when the energy is relatively lower cost. And as you know, for example, if you have a Tesla in the US, you put it for charging, it watches what are the lowest cost of energy and it charges at that point in time. And so you can essentially have a situation where you charge at night. When the energy costs are high during the day, you discharge because you don't need the whole battery for your daily running anyway. So, that as a part of global energy, respiratory, not repository, respiratory system. High voltage electronics I talked about. Other hardware, substantial work in the area of sustainability and weight. And the point that Mr. Vinod Agrawal made about circularity. All these things, I think this is where a lot of research and development is going to happen. And this is where there will be opportunities for all of us for our future. So what I've tried to do, and I can't go through it all in details, but what I'm saying is that what is the software-defined vehicles, what type of new software trends they will usher in every area, whether it is autonomous driving or electrification or middleware. So autonomous driving, of course, the generative AI, the service-oriented architecture, a lot of work happening. Actually, in the new SDV, ADAS will have a large role to play. So a lot of work happening in that area. Electrification, again, and I spoke about domain controllers or virtual validation, etc. Middleware, and I think this is going to be a big area because you are going to have multiple hardwares doing multiple functions. You need one area where it interacts. And that has to be extremely safe, secure, fast. This is not something that makes a difference to the car's personalization, but it makes a difference to the car's stability or dependability. Much work happening in that area. What kind of architecture it would be, what kind of a backbone will it have, what kind of domain-independent software development can happen in that area. A lot of things happening. Connected and cloud, and I talked about that a bit, and body electronics. So almost every aspect of vehicle, every aspect of its hardware and software is going to be impacted by this new trend. So software-defined vehicles is really the important part. We have been working as strategic partners to 6 out of the 9 global SDV programs which have been around the globe. And we work with most of them. To me, the way if I were to be at a time 20 years from now, and if I were to look back, the questions that I will ask, and the question of most of you will ask, is that why did we drive our own vehicles when it could drive itself? Why were we doing it ourselves, 2-3 hours every day? Why did we even own a personal vehicle when we could use one on demand? Why did we burn so much carbon to run our vehicles when we could use green tech? So these are some of the questions that will come up in our mind at that time. As I said, this industry is in a point of inflection. I think we as an industry, the automotive industry, I consider myself to be a part of that, have an ability to become a significant driver in the change of the world towards sustainable living. We contribute to 16% of global emission. We can actually contribute to net negative emissions. And that's the challenge ahead of us, and that's the opportunity. And I'm certain that we will all contribute to making this happen. I want to thank ETAuto for organizing this thing and inviting me to talk to all of you. Thank you so much.